as much as many people say funny things all over the place at the times they go on, I find myself having to turn around and say to them, at least, the joke is not funny. The joke is never sorry for itself. There are many ways to look at it the right way around on storage. You could have 85 gigabytes of freed up space and have an approximate 400-hour value on the audio. It can dictate that way. Or alternatively, you could have enough wrapped around messages inside audio quality and the video itself, the tapestry of the multiple images that are necessary to provide the required effort for the film itself. In which case, this can take up almost a third, if not more, of the available 85 gigabyte hard drive space for simply a 2-hour feature film. Now, the stated cause of this normality, as we are so to be stated, as is the cause of, is due to the complete nature of the surroundings of it. For itself to be admittedly be able to understand the technician of the writing sort of programming itself. So if you have an MPEG versus a JPEG, they're two completely different files altogether. One's audio and one's video. If you have an AVI, which are almost outdated, or an MP4, which is the most current surrounding video format still, those are completely different than, say, a ASC file or a PNG. And if you get into MIDI directly enough anyway, it's the cause of the stated person to be delicate to the surroundings of the touch of the sound itself, purposely, actually. You don't want to mess around with the MIDI settings unless you know what you're doing correctly enough anyway. It is enough to ruin your computer hardware directly enough anyway to be completely for it to directly stop working anyway. Now, for the purpose of this cause to be out of hand is unnecessary for most of the values indicated. But the idea is that, you end up adding drivers to these software file type players that allow for added features such as subtitles or different arrangements of audio qualities, or switching over from English to Spanish audio in and of itself, or even the ability to view extra scenes from different scene angles on a DVD or something perhaps. Now, where am I getting with the stale normality figure of this conversation we're having? The idea is that dependent on the software type of the individual choices we make for ourselves completely, it inherits the average for itself completely, otherwise outside around us. So the conventional .mp4 being the provided, required as necessity file type for the Android phone to operate the value correctly, is directly inherent to a voice recorder playing a .m4a file. Now, these are technically different workaround options, entirely differently than supposed to be of each other, directly because of the voltage indicated by which the programming indicates for itself directly. Hence, the hardware should be completely different. Hence, the application of the provided gear to the hardware, you could say, or the accessories, such as the microphone itself, or the speaker system, or earphones, or whatever internal, external speaker option you have for your phone. So, provided of which we dictate these values of needed as necessity, dictates at one point or another which of point to prove from which of the other or not. Okay, so I suppose that MP4 could be considered the superiority to an AVI file type because the AVI file type is mostly outdated at this point because it doesn't have current drivers that keep up with the technical necessity for the advanced resolution options and stuff like that. It can still handle it directly enough anyway, but to the point that it causes itself an inherent amount of trouble in order to provide smoothly, clearly rendered data as itself as such would be required to anyway for a DVD quality or Blu-ray quality audio-video file together on itself, because it's mostly processing still images at this point. So to the point where MP4 files direct the audio type generally enough anyway, because there is MP in MP4 originating correctly enough anyway from the MP3 file type, which is a currently stated, actually still recommended file type for audio, at least for things like MP3 players and stuff, which is a feature on the phone itself directly, generally, anyway. But, alternatively, it can be an arrangement with the MP4 to directly just play the audio itself. So it's a clearly cut driver integrated thing that happens within the MP4 file itself. Now, this causes its own stale reality as well. The idea is that it's kind of inherently designed for the same purpose of the technical resolution values, no matter what, and as updated, it needs change as directly. So, without the correct file type, the MP4 file type is essentially broken. So it's not necessarily self-evaluating value system. It purposes for itself. It can become the cause of the indicated stale value itself and does need to be updated directly because of it technically. So when you upgrade these values and you go to, the MP4 audio type and stuff, then it becomes clear that the audio is directly playing into your head as necessary to be a foundation for the surroundings itself. So it's actually a high audio fidelity within the MP4 range of audio type file it indicates as such would be needed to be required for itself, such an effort of resolution to keep up with, essentially, for the MP4 video file type itself of the file type in itself directly. Now, where we get to this point is, this conversation is becoming stale as it's happening. It's not necessarily because it's an uninteresting conversation about the rest of the figures of the conversation even, but it's stale directly to the point that it leads nowhere. Like a heavy, flat cement cube that's just sitting in the middle of a park walkway for some reason. It's blocking direct access to the picnic benches slightly enough to just need to walk around, and for no point of needing to get there really until this point where you can stand upon it, right? The platform of the image becomes clear at this point, at which point the indicated presentation has begun at this point. Onward from here, it would needed be necessary to indicate the values upon which fills in such a conversation for itself. As I stated directly in the beginning of the video itself, the joke is not funny. The joke is not sorry for itself. Okay, so the idea that inherent staleness of normality for ourselves is inherently conducting difficulty for others is not inherently our fault to approve of or disapprove of independently for ourselves. But it's not on the choice of others directly enough anyway to do anything about it for the first part of it directly enough anyway. So beyond this point is technically and necessarily up to us to define such standards as needing redefinement themselves for such as the cause to be the case.